Welcome, dear listener. Whispers of the night. Tonight, you have arrived at a quiet corner of the evening, a place where time drifts slower than the world outside. The rain has softened to a gentle hush against the windows, and the warm glow of lamplight wraps around this room like a blanket. In the stillness, the air feels thick with comfort, the kind that needs no words. Only the small sound of your own breathing and the soft sigh of night. You are here to rest, to leave the day at the door, and to walk with me into a story made of calm and wonder. Let your thoughts loosen, unhurried, as we take the first steps together into a dream. Before we begin the journey, let us pause together for a moment of quiet. Feel the slow rhythm of your breath, like waves moving in and out of the shore. Inhale gently, drawing in cool night air, and exhale softly, releasing the weight of the day. Notice how the air around you seems still, how even the smallest sounds, the distant hum of a night breeze, or the faint tick of a clock, become soothing in their simplicity. Imagine you are standing in a rain-washed street at night. The stones beneath your feet glisten faintly, and a soft mist rises around you, blurring the edges of the world. Overhead, a single star peeks through the drifting clouds, its light ancient, its glow a reminder of how small and quiet this moment truly is. You hold a warm loaf of bread against your chest, its scent of grain and fire wrapping you in comfort. Each step you take is slow, steady, unhurried, and the night accepts you fully into its embrace. As you breathe, feel your body become lighter, as though you too are drifting through this quiet street. You are in no rush. There is nowhere you must be, no task that waits for you, only this gentle walk, this soft rain, and the warm glow of a candle in the window behind you. With every breath, the world grows softer, quieter, until the line between thought and dream begins to fade. You are safe, you are warm, and you are ready to rest. The Rainy Day Bakery. The first raindrops. The world is holding its breath. The street around you feels paused, as though a great, invisible clock has decided to slow its ticking, each second stretching and softening until it barely makes a sound. The cobblestones are the first to speak, in tiny, muted syllables, a patter here, a tap there, as the first raindrops begin their slow descent from a sky the color of folded linen. The drops arrive tentatively, as if the clouds are still deciding whether to share the rest of their weight with the earth. Each one carries its own long journey, evaporated from ocean or lake, lifted high by warm air, spun into invisible vapor, gathered into cloud. You can almost feel the altitude in them, the thin chill of upper air, the quiet patience of water. Molecules suspended in the vast gray library of the sky. The air changes before the rain fully claims the morning. You notice it, that delicate scent of earth meeting water, known to scientists as petrichor. It's the perfume of dry soil releasing aromatic compounds, a collaboration between the land and the rain. For a moment, you imagine each drop as a messenger carrying news back to the ground from the wandering vapors above. The smell is not just romance, it's chemistry, molecules like geosmin rising from the soil to greet the moisture. Your nose reads it like a familiar sentence, a story it has known since childhood. Somewhere nearby, bread is baking. The scent drifts toward you in soft ribbons, warm and sweet, tangling with the cool sharpness of the rain. Bread and rain, two of humanity's oldest comforts, arriving in the same breath. The yeast, living and patient, has been at work for hours, breaking down starch into sugars, filling the dough with bubbles of carbon dioxide that will be trapped forever in a golden crumb. You picture the baker, hands dusted with flour-like, pale pollen, shaping loaves with the same quiet focus as a cloud shaping rain. A drop lands on your cheek, warmer than you expected, and you lift your face slightly toward the sky. Above you, the rain has begun to settle into a steady rhythm, not hurried but committed now. You can almost hear its journey down, the whisper of each drop slicing through layers of atmosphere, catching light, refracting tiny fragments of the pale morning into invisible rainbows before it falls. Water falling as rain always arrives, changed, having shifted from vapor to liquid, from invisible to visible, from nowhere to here. You step forward slowly. The cobblestones beneath you hold puddles in their shallow dips, each one a tiny mirror quivering with the strike of raindrops. The reflections tremble and blur, bending the buildings into impressionist shapes. Somewhere in the movement, you see yourself a passing figure, softened by ripples, as though you are part of the painting instead of the street. The bakery is close now. Its windows are misted, turning the light inside into a warm, glowing haze. This is the opposite of the rain's cool silver here. Gold spills out into the gray morning in a way that feels almost like memory. You open the door, and the sound changes instantly. The rain becomes background music, muted and distant, as the air inside enfolds you. It is warm here, the kind of warmth that feels thick enough to touch. The air carries not only the scent of bread, but also a faint sweetness, perhaps honey glazing a pastry, and the faint sharpness of coffee. You stand still for a moment, letting the difference between outside and inside sink into your skin, the same way a raindrop sinks into the earth dot from the counter. You can see trays of bread cooling, steam rising in faint threads that dissolve before they reach the ceiling. The loaves rest shoulder to shoulder, as if huddling together after their long transformation in the oven. You think of how each started as flour, milled grain, the seed of a grass that once swayed in a sunlit field, mixed with water, kneaded into life by the baker's hands. The parallel is almost too neat. Outside, water returns to the earth. Here, water has been taken into grain and turned into nourishment. You wrap your hands around a cup of tea. The ceramic radiates heat into your palms, and the steam curls upward, catching the light like pale silk. You watch it twist and fade, knowing that what you are seeing is water once again becoming invisible, the same transformation that began the rain's journey in reverse. Everything in this morning seems to circle back to water. The clouds, the rain, the steam, even the yeast that needed moisture to wake. Through the window, the rain has grown heavier. Drops chase each other down the glass, merging into rivulets that sway like clear vines. You follow their slow race to the sill, hypnotized by the way they gather, part, and rejoin. The street outside is almost empty now, except for one or two figures moving under umbrellas like small drifting islands. Their footsteps are muffled, as though the rain has placed a soft cloth over the world. You sip your tea and think of how ancient this sound is, the sound of rain falling on stone. Before cities, before streets, before even bread, there was this. Water falling from the sky, shaping rivers, nourishing soil, carving valleys. Every drop is part of a cycle without beginning or end. Some of this water may have fallen here 100 years ago, or 1,000. Some may have fallen on another continent entirely. Some may have been ice in a polar sheet, or a bead of dew on a rainforest leaf. Now, it is here, briefly, before it moves on again. The baker places a small loaf in front of you, its crust crackling faintly as it cools. You tear it open, releasing a cloud of steam, scented with the earthiness of wheat and the faint tang of fermentation. You take a slow bite, the crust yielding to the tender crumb within. The flavor is warm, nutty, and alive, as though the grain still remembers the wind that once passed over its field. Time moves differently here. The outside world, with its wet stones and racing drops, seems to exist on another side of a veil. The inside is all stillness, except for the quiet rhythm of the baker at work, the soft thump of dough against wood, the faint scrape of a blade scoring a loaf, the delicate chime of a timer. The rain's music joins in, distant but constant, like an old record playing in another room. Eventually, you stand and make your way back to the door. The baker nods, hands still deep in dough, as if this greeting has been exchanged countless times before. You step outside, and the cool air folds around you again. The rain greets your face with the same gentle touch it had at the start, but now it feels fuller, more certain of itself. The cobblestones gleam underfoot, each one darkened and polished by the rain. The smell of petrichor lingers, mingling with the faint ghost of bread still clinging to your senses. You walk slowly, letting the drops gather on your coat, not hurrying, as if the morning has opened into a space you can wander through without reaching its end. Above you, the clouds shift slightly, letting a thinner light through. It is not quite sunlight, but it carries the suggestion of it, a promise that the sky may clear, though not yet. You pause at a corner where water gathers in a small stream along the gutter, carrying with it petals, leaves, and tiny fragments of the street's life. They swirl and dance, guided by unseen gradients, heading somewhere you cannot follow. You find yourself wondering where the rain goes once it leaves this street. Into the river, perhaps, then toward the sea, then skyward again. You picture it, traveling far beyond your sight, joining storms over other towns, falling on other stones, other mornings. The thought is strangely comforting that what is here now will not be lost, only changed, waiting for another time, another place, another first drop. And as you turn down the next quiet street, you hear a new sound beneath the rain, the faint, rhythmic flutter of wings in the damp air, drawing your gaze upward toward the next story. Flower in the air. The door closes softly behind you, and the sound of rain is reduced to a hushed percussion against the bakery's windows. Inside, the air feels thick with warmth, carrying the scent of yeast and toasted crust. You pause, letting your eyes adjust to the amber light. It is the kind of light that makes everything softer, edges blurred, colors deeper, as if the morning itself has stepped inside to rest. Behind the counter, the baker moves with deliberate ease. Each motion is measured, but not mechanical. His hands work as though they know the next movement before his mind does. In the glow of the lamps, fine particles of flour drift through the air in slow spirals, catching the light like pale constellations in a small domestic universe. They rise and fall with the smallest disturbance, a passing step, the turn of a loaf, the press of palms against dough, creating a quiet snowfall that never reaches the ground. You watch as he lifts a linen cloth from a waiting bowl inside. The dough is alive. It has grown in the night, filling the bowl's curve, its surface stretched and domed like a rising moon. The baker slides his hands beneath it, and the dough sighs faintly as it is turned onto the work table, deflating in a gentle release of carbon dioxide. A breath exhaled after hours of fermentation. Your mind drifts to the journey of the flour itself. Once, it was grain in a field, swaying under the sun. Wheat, with its long bristles catching the wind, is a grass, one of the first plants humans chose to cultivate. Thousands of years ago, on plains and riverbanks, people gathered wild seeds, ground them between stones, and learned the secret that mixing this powder with water and heat could make something soft, nourishing, and sustaining. Over time, fields replaced forests, and wheat became a companion species, woven into our survival. Now, the grains are harvested by great rumbling machines, but their transformation still echoes the old ways. In the mill, rollers crush the kernels, separating the soft endosperm from the bran and germ. The endosperm is ground into the fine powder before you now flour. Even in this form, the grain holds the memory of its life, the starch for structure, the proteins that will become gluten, the subtle flavors of the soil where it grew. The baker scatters a handful of flour across the table. It lands in a pale drift, then spreads as he turns the dough onto it. His hands fold and press, push and gather. You notice the rhythm, a slow, steady cycle, as constant as a heartbeat. Each push aligns the gluten strands, giving the bread its structure. In the science of baking, gluten is a network of proteins that trap the gas produced by yeast, allowing the dough to rise into its airy, tender form. But here, in this moment, it is simply the satisfying stretch and spring beneath the baker's hands, the dough responding like a living thing. The air smells different near the table, deeper, richer, as if the fermentation has a voice of its own. Yeast, a tiny single-celled fungus, has been dining on the dough's sugars through the night, producing both gas and the complex flavors that make bread taste more than the sum of its parts. Every loaf is a quiet collaboration between human and microbe, guided by time and patience. You step closer, and the flour in the air thickens, drifting like morning mist. It settles lightly on your sleeve, soft and cool. In the lamplight, each mote is a small universe, and you think about how much life is contained in something so small. A grain of wheat holds energy captured from sunlight, stored in starch, waiting to be released. A spoonful of flour carries not just matter, but history, the labor of farmers, the cycles of seasons, the genetic inheritance of plants cultivated over millennia. The baker folds the dough again, this time shaping it into a smooth round. He rests it on a wooden peel, its surface already dusted, and covers it once more with linen. Rest, he says, without speaking, is as much a part of bread as heat or water. The dough must pause before it continues, so that the gluten can relax. The yeast can keep working, and the flavors can deepen. It reminds you of the rain outside, which began as vapor long before you arrived, waiting unseen until the right moment to fall. He turns to the oven, a great, domed cavern of brick and iron. The heat radiates outward, a slow, steady warmth that smells faintly of wood and stone. The baker opens the door, and a wave of air greets you, carrying the scent of loaves already inside. Bread baking is a kind of controlled transformation. Water turning to steam, starches gelatinizing, crust caramelizing in the Maillard reaction. A dance of heat and chemistry that has been feeding humanity for thousands of years. He slides another loaf inside, then closes the door with a quiet thud. The room exhales. You sit at a small table near the window, the one you stood by earlier, watching rain. Now, the glass is a blur of gray and gold, the outside world softened by condensation. The sound of the rain continues, a metronome for the baker's work. Somewhere beyond the counter, you hear the faint rustle of paper as someone wraps a loaf for a customer. The muffled murmur of thanks. The baker moves to the back, where sacks of flour rests against the wall. You notice their weight, the quiet, patient potential in each one. A 50-kilogram sack could feed many families, its contents transformed into bread, pastry, noodles, all from small seeds sown in dark earth, tended by sun and rain. You think of how the rain you walked through this morning might nourish next year's wheat, and how those grains might, in turn, return here to this table, to these hands. The flour in the air settles slowly, though never entirely. Every movement stirs it again, just enough to make it glimmer in the lamplight. You sip a warm drink, feeling the quiet energy of the place seep into you. The bakery is not hurried. Everything here moves at the speed of yeast and heat, which is to say, at the speed of patience. A bell at the oven signals readiness. The baker lifts the door, and the golden crusts inside shine in the dim light. He reaches for a peel, drawing out each loaf as if retrieving treasure. The air changes again, richer, almost sweet, as steam escapes from the hot bread. He sets them on a rack to cool, the crusts crackling faintly as they contract in the cooler air. You watch him cut into one. The blade slides through with a soft crunch, revealing a tender crumb, still steaming. He offers you a piece, and you take it in your hands, feeling its warmth seep into your skin. The first bite is both familiar and new. The salt, the grain, the faint temps of fermentation. Bread has been called the staff of life, and in this moment, you understand why. It is simple, sustaining, and complete. Time passes unnoticed. The rain outside shifts between steady and sparse, and the light in the bakery changes subtly with it. The flour still hangs in the air, catching each flicker of brightness, marking the moments like dust motes in a sundial's beam. Eventually, the baker wipes the table clean, the flour swirling once more before settling. He stacks the trays, folds the linens, and checks the next batch of dough. The cycle continues: mix, knead, rest, bake, as it has for generations. You realize that what you are watching is not just baking, but the quiet persistence of a craft older than most cities, passed down through countless hands. You finish your drink and stand, feeling the warmth of the bread still in you. As you step toward the door, the baker nods again, his hands already busy with the next shaping. Outside, the rain greets you like an old friend. The air is cooler, but carries with it the faint echo of the bakery's warmth, as though you have taken a piece of it with you. The cobblestones glisten under your feet, and the rain gathers in small streams that wind their way toward the drains. You follow them with your eyes, wondering where they will go and what they might become. In the distance, through the softened air, you hear a faint sound, the low, steady murmur of water, finding its path toward a wider flow, and your thoughts begin to drift. The history in the oven. The dough rests under its linen shroud, quietly expanding as if dreaming of its own shape. The baker leans against the table, wiping flour from his hands, and looks toward you with the kind of calm that invites listening. His voice is soft, unhurried, carrying the weight of many mornings like this one. He begins not with a recipe, but with a memory from long before either of you were born, a memory borrowed from history itself. The first bread, he says, was likely an accident, a paste of ground seeds and water left too close to a fire. Heat transformed it, lifting it from raw to edible, from seed mush to something fragrant and sustaining. The people who tasted it must steady as his voice. He tells you about ancient Egypt, where bread was both daily sustenance and sacred offering. In hieroglyphs, loaves appear beside pharaohs and gods, their rounded forms carved in stone as symbols of life. Bakers worked beside brewers, for both bread and beer relied on the same partner, yeast. Archaeologists have found bread baked over 4,000 years ago. Imagine he says, pulling a loaf from a clay oven under the desert sun, the air carrying the same rich scent that now curls through. This room, your gaze drifts to the oven behind him, its low arch, its dark interior, the faint glow within, and you picture those Egyptian hearths, dome-shaped, fed by wood, the bread pressed to hot walls or laid on flat stones. Grain, mostly immer wheat, was milled by hand with heavy corns, the rhythmic grinding a song of labor and survival. Each loaf was not just food, but proof of human ingenuity, the turning of wild grass into a cornerstone of civilization. The baker shifts the story forward. There were communal ovens in the city, fed all day by fires that never went out. Inscriptions still survive, naming pisters, millers, and bakers who supplied bread to citizens daily. The Roman army marched on loaves and porridge, carrying hard, dry bread that could last for weeks. For the poor, it was darker, coarser, filled with bran. But rich or poor, everyone knew the smell of bread, the way it could make a home out of a bare room. You imagine stepping into a Roman bakery, heat rolling from the oven's mouth, the air thick with ash and wheat. Outside, children would run errands with small baskets, carrying bread still warm to their families. The baker says the smell must have reached every street just as it does here, though now it mingles with the scent of rain and the faint sweetness of sugar. The story moves again, leaping centuries. In medieval Europe, he says, ovens were often the heart of a village. Not everyone could afford their own, so people brought their dough to a communal baker, paying in coins or in bread itself. Bread was not merely food, it was currency, offering, sustenance, and sometimes survival. Bad harvests could bring famine. Good harvests meant full granaries and a winter without hunger. The shape of the loaf could even carry meaning. Long loaves for sharing, round ones for the household, intricately scored for festivals. The baker's eyes glint as he speaks of France, where bread became both an art and a symbol. In Parisian boulangeries, windows filled with golden loaves drew people in from cobbled streets. The baguette, long and slender, came later, shaped to bake quickly and be carried easily under the arm. The crust shattering at the touch, the crumb light and open became a measure of skill. French law once dictated that bread must be sold fresh each day, saved by milk and sugar. Around you, the bakery carries faint echoes of all these eras. The wooden counter could belong in any century. The sacks of flour would be familiar to any miller from the past 1,000 years. Even the dough resting under its linen seems timeless, caught in the same cycle of mixing, rising, baking that has repeated for millennia. The baker speaks now of how bread traveled across oceans, deserts, and mountains. Explorers carried it aboard ships. In parts of Asia, wheat joined rice as a staple. In the Americas, maize mingled with wheat in kitchens, creating new traditions. Every place gave bread its own accent. Flatbreads in the Middle East, soft milk bread in Japan, sourdough in San Francisco, dense rye loaves in Northern Europe. Your mind wanders through these kitchens, a fire pit in a nomadic tent, a clay tandoor, glowing orange in the dusk, a cast-iron pot buried in coals. Everywhere, hands shape dough fingers pressing, palms folding, the same human gestures repeated over centuries. The science has not changed. Yeast still consumes sugars, gluten still stretches and traps gas, heat still transforms, but the meaning has grown richer, layered with the weight of human history. The baker lifts the linen from the resting dough. It has risen again, smooth and airy under the cloth. He turns it gently, as though waking a child, then shapes it with quick, sure hands. You notice how the flour dusts the table, the same pale drift you saw earlier, and wonder if Egyptian bakers, Roman pastors, and medieval villagers saw the same soft clouds in their own bakeries. He slides the shaped dough into the oven. The heat greets it instantly, setting the crust even as the inside swells. The transformation has begun, unseen but inevitable. Starches gelatinizing, proteins firming, water turning to steam. The baker talks about the Maillard reaction, that golden alchemy between amino acids and sugars, creating hundreds of flavor compounds, each contributing to the bread's aroma and taste. This too is ancient, the same reaction that browned the first accidental loaf beside a fire. The smell begins to deepen, weaving through the room until it feels like another presence. It moves beyond the door, spilling into the street. You picture passers-by pausing in the rain, drawn by the invisible thread of scent, following it without thinking. The baker smiles. He's seen it before. Bread has a way of gathering people, of pulling them closer. As the minutes pass, the crust turns from pale to amber, from amber to gold. The rain outside seems to match the oven's rhythm, each drop a counterpart to the expanding loaf. The baker tells you how in some towns. The sound of the baker's paddle on the oven floor was a kind of clock, marking the hours of the day. In others, the smell of baking was the signal for children to run home. He steps to the oven and opens its door. The heat blooms outward, carrying the scent of history, Egypt, Rome, Paris, and the countless places in between. He draws the loaf out, setting it on the counter with care. The crust sings quietly as it cools, releasing its small pops and sighs, as though telling its own story in a language older than words. You break the bread together. The crumb is soft, the crust delicate yet strong. As you chew, the taste is both present and distant, a reminder of where it began, in soil and sun, and where it has traveled through hands and ovens to reach this table. Every bite is a bridge across time, connecting you to those who baked, to those who pulled loaves from communal ovens while church bells rang dot. The baker says history is never gone. It's baked into what we eat, stored in the scents and textures we recognize without knowing why. Bread is proof, quite literally, that the past can be alive in the present. You imagine all the unseen threads that have led to this loaf, all the moments, choices, and lives folded into its making. Outside, the rain begins to slow. Light shifts through the clouds, touching the wet cobblestones with a silvery sheen. The bakery feels warmer now, not only from the oven, but from the weight of the stories it holds. You finish your slice. Waters that once carried grain from field to city. You rise, following the sound of his steps, hearing in the distance the faint, steady murmur of water finding its way beyond the street. Tea steam and rain song. The kettle hums before it sings. It is a low, rising sound, almost like a distant train approaching through mist, or the breath of wind before it gathers into rain. You watch the thin plume of steam forming at the spout, rising in soft ribbons that twist and dissolve into the warm air outside. The rain is steady now, not a storm, not a downpour, but a sure and constant presence. Each drop strikes the glass with its own small note, together creating a rhythm that is both irregular and soothing. The sound folds into the walls, into the wooden floor beneath your feet, into the warm space around you. The baker moves quietly in the background, tending to the last loaves, his motions as unhurried as the rains. You turn your attention to the kettle again, noting the way the steam curls, disperses, reforms. It is a shape that will never be repeated exactly, though it has been made 1,000 times before. Steam is only water. Yes, molecules escaping from the liquid below, but to watch it feels like observing thought itself, fleeting, intangible, constantly changing. You pour the water over tea leaves waiting in the pot. The leaves shiver and sway in the sudden heat, releasing their scent into the air. It is a green, earthy fragrance with edges of something floral and faintly sweet. You think about where these leaves began, perhaps on a hillside in Yunnan, or among the mist-trapped gardens of Darjeeling. Each leaf was once part of a living plant, drawing sunlight into itself, storing it in chemical bonds that now, here, will dissolve into your cup. Tea, like bread, carries its own deep history. The baker, still moving behind you, offers a quiet fact. The earliest records of tea drinking come from China over 2,000 years ago. It was used first as medicine, then as daily comfort, then as a ritual. The Camellia sinensis plant, with its glossy green leaves, yet always with the same essential truth. Hot water unlocks its hidden world. You lift the lid and watch the color seep into the water. Pale at first, like sunlight through thin curtains, then deepening into gold, then amber. The transformation is slow but sure. As compounds dissolve, polyphenols that give flavor and tannins, amino acids that soften the taste, essential oils that rise with the steam. In the stillness, you can almost hear it, the quiet migration of molecules, the rearranging of water into tea dot. You pour the first cup, the liquid glows in the lamplight, a contained sunrise. The porcelain warms your hands, heat radiating through, skin into bone. You inhale before you sip, letting the scent fill your senses. There is something calming in that pause, the moment before taste, when your mind is only anticipation. The first sip is gentle. Heat spreads through your mouth, down your throat, into your chest. Flavors unfold in layers, grassy, nutty, faintly sweet, with a slight dryness at the edges. This is not a drink to be rushed. The warmth asks you to slow down, to let each swallow be a small moment of attention. Outside, the rain continues its quiet percussion. It is joined by the faint hiss of tires passing on wet streets, the occasional shuffle of footsteps beyond the door. But these sounds feel far away, softened by the tea's warmth and the closeness of the room. You and the baker exchange a few words, low and slow, your voices blending with the rain until they seem part of the same song. The steam from your cup rises into the air, catching light as it moves. It reminds you of clouds forming, water molecules escaping from the warm surface, gathering into visible mist, then drifting apart. On a much larger scale, the same process is happening outside. Rain begins as evaporation from oceans, lakes, rivers, even from wet streets like the one beyond the window. The molecules rise, unseen, until they cool enough to gather into droplets, until gravity calls them back to Earth. You sip again, thinking about how much of the water in your cup has made that journey countless times before. You set the cup down and watch the ripples fade. In tea ceremonies, there is often a focus on stillness, not just in the liquid, but in the mind. Even here, without formality, you feel the effect, a slowing of thought, sense of alignment between breath, warmth, and sound. The rain becomes your metronome, the steam your drifting focus, the taste your quiet anchor. The baker joins you with his own cup, sitting across the small wooden table. His hands are still dusted faintly with flour, though the day's work is nearly done. You speak little, there is no need. Tea fills the space between words, making silence feel complete rather than empty. He tells you, in that same unhurried voice, about the chemistry of tea's comfort. Some compounds, like theanine, can relax the mind without making it dull. Others, like caffeine, can lift it without making it restless. It is a balanced stimulation wrapped in calm, and it is why tea has been a companion to meditation for centuries. You think of monks in quiet halls, cups warming their palms as they sit in stillness, steam mingling with candle smoke. Outside, the rain shifts, growing softer, then heavier, then soft again. You notice how the sound changes with the wind's direction, how drops on glass differ from drops on stone, how a passing breeze scatters the rhythm for a moment before it finds its pulse again. It is music without melody, yet it carries the same ability to soothe. You cradle your cup and look out through the misted window. The street is blurred, shapes moving slowly through the gray. An umbrella tilts against the wind. A bicycle coasts past, tires whispering on wet cobblestones. The bakery's golden light spills outward, pooling on the slick pavement before fading into the rain. Your tea cools gradually, the steam thinning, the flavor deepening in its quiet way. There is something intimate about drinking tea while rain falls, as if the outside world has been politely asked to wait. Inside, time is not entirely still, but it moves differently, folding in on itself in soft layers. The baker refills your cup from the pot, and you watch the amber liquid swirl into what remains of the first pour. The motion stirs new ripples, new patterns in the steam. You think about how no two cups of tea are exactly the same, even from the same pot. The proportions shift, the temperature changes, the moment in which you taste it is different. The tea, like the rain, is a lesson in impermanence. a lull in conversation allows the other sounds to return more vividly. The faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the soft creak of wood as it settles, the rain's syncopation on roof and glass. Your thoughts drift to the places tea travels before reaching this table, from hillside gardens to drying rooms, from hands that pluck leaves at dawn to ships and trains that carry them across continents. Each cup is a small convergence of earth, weather, labor, and time. You take one last slow sip from the cup, letting it rest on your tongue a moment longer. The warmth lingers even after you swallow, a gentle echo that moves outward through you. The rain outside has eased, its rhythm slower now, like a song reaching its final verse. Steam no longer rises from your tea, but the memory of it remains, that upward curl, that slow unfurling into air. The baker glances toward the door, listening. Beyond the glass, you hear it too, a new sound beneath the fading rain. Low and steady, almost like a breath drawn from the earth itself. You set your cup down, the porcelain making a soft chime on the wood. The sound is faint but certain, water moving in a way that is not falling but flowing. You imagine it gathering somewhere nearby, in gutters and streams, slipping to something larger. You rise, still holding the warmth of tea within you, and feel a quiet pull toward the unseen source of that steady murmur. Evening loaves. The light outside is changing. It is no longer the pale silver of morning rain, nor the steady gold of the afternoon. Now it carries the deep amber of day's last exhale. Shadows lengthen along the cobblestones, soft-edged and slow-moving, as though the entire street is reluctant to surrender to the night. Inside the bakery, the warmth seems to swell in response to the gathering dark. It is the kind of warmth that clings to your skin even after you've stepped away from the oven, the kind that smells faintly of wood and wheat and something ancient. Through the wide front window, you see a gentle congregation of neighbors, some stepping in from the rain, others passing by and drawn to the light as moths to a safe flame. The baker moves with a quiet urgency now, though it's nothing like the hurried bustle of a city kitchen. This is a practiced rhythm, born of years of knowing when to move quickly and when to let the dough simply be. From the oven, fresh loaves appear in a small procession rye, whole wheat, seeded sourdough, a few glossy baguettes. Their crusts speak in the language of cooling bread, faint cracks, soft sighs, little brittle snaps that seem almost like applause for having survived the heat. You watch as he taps the base of a loaf with his knuckles. The hollow sound it gives is an ancient centuries-old of doneness. Long before timers and thermometers, bakers learned to trust their ears as much as their eyes. In that small, resonant thump lies an echo of stone ovens in ancient Egypt, where the Nile's fertile silt grew the first cultivated wheat, and of Roman bakeries where communal ovens warmed entire districts. The air is heavy with scent, and scent is memory's most faithful ally. Your mind carries you backward without effort. The smell alone can collapse time. A loaf cooling on a windowsill in a grandmother's kitchen, a market stall at dusk, its paper bags still warm to the touch, a trail of crumbs on a plate after a simple meal. And yet, scent is also science. What you smell in this moment, the tangy sweet complexity of crust and crumbs, the work of heat unlocking hidden compounds. During baking, the Maillard reaction transforms proteins and sugars into hundreds of new aromatic molecules. It is chemistry turned into comfort, the invisible made tangible. The same reaction browns meat, toasts seeds, and caramelizes onions, but in bread, it is uniquely deepened by fermentation's slow alchemy. Hours, sometimes days, of microbial labor in the dough lay the groundwork for this single hour of baking. The customers arrive slowly, as though not to startle the evening. Some come in pairs, murmuring over which loaf to take. Others slip in, alone, their umbrellas still dripping, their eyes drawn to the counter's gentle bounty. You notice how the baker greets each one by name, often recalling their usual order without needing to be told. In that exchange brief, warm, familiar, you see that bread is rarely bought for sustenance alone. It is bought for connection, for the sense of belonging that lingers long after the loaf is gone. In villages and cities alike, evening bread has been a ritual for centuries. In some Mediterranean towns, families still collect fresh loaves just before dinner, timing the meal to the bread's peak warmth. In parts of France, the boulangerie once set the daily rhythm, with neighbors meeting in line to exchange news before walking home under lamplight. In Egypt's bustling alleys, stacks of baladi bread ride on the heads of swift-footed boys, weaving through traffic to deliver still steaming rounds. Wherever it is made, evening bread becomes a kind of anchor, something to carry from the light into the dark, a piece of the day's work turned into nourishment. The rain outside grows steadier, its sound a soft percussion behind the low hum of conversation. The walls of the bakery hold the moment in suspension. Steam still lifts from the newest loaves, curling in invisible ribbons toward the ceiling beams. The wooden shelves creak faintly as the bread settles into its cooling, the crusts adjusting to the cooler air. It is a sound so small that you might miss it if you weren't here. Listening, you are reminded that bread, for all its familiarity, is alive in more ways than most people realize. Even after leaving the oven, the crumb continues to set. Starch molecules slowly rearrange themselves, releasing a little more moisture, deepening the texture hour by hour. The scent changes too bright and yeasty at first, mellowing into something richer and more grounded. It is a quiet transformation, and like so many small miracles, it happens without an audience. At the far end of the counter, a young couple shares the last slice of a small loaf, tearing it by hand rather than cutting it. In doing so, they echo a gesture far older than cutlery. Archaeological finds show that communal tearing of bread was part of social rituals as far back as Neolithic times. To break bread together was to enter into a silent agreement of peace, of hospitality, of shared fortune. It is one of humanity's simplest yet most enduring ceremonies. The baker, now with flour dusted up his forearms, moves to prepare the final batch of the night. This dough will not be baked until dawn. It rests now, covered and breathing slowly, allowing its gluten strands to strengthen while fermentation works unseen. The yeast, tiny single-celled fungi, consume sugars and exhale carbon dioxide, filling the dough with pockets of air. Each bubble is a miniature vault, a fragile architecture that will hold its shape in the heat of the oven. In that rise is a lesson in patience, the kind of patience that fits well into the rhythm of evening. The light outside deepens into navy blue. Reflections shimmer on the wet cobblestones, bending the bakery's glow into soft, trembling shapes. The customers who linger do so without hurry, as though stepping back into the night might break the spell. A man leans against the counter with his coffee, eyes on the rain. A girl in a green coat folds her paper bag closed with great care, holding it to her chest as if it might escape. When the door opens, a gust of cool, damp air snakes into the room, carrying with it the smell of rain on stone. The air outside is sharp, smelling faintly of iron and earth. Geosmin, the compound released when raindrops strike dry soil, stirring ancient bacterial spores into the breeze. Inside, that scent mixes with the deep warmth of bread, creating something that feels almost impossible to define. It is at once grounding and uplifting, a tether to the physical world and an invitation to drift beyond it. You take your own loaf at last. The paper bag crinkles softly in your hands, and the warmth seeps through, radiating into your palms. Outside, the street glistens under lamplight, and the sound of the rain is different, now less distant, more present, like a slow companion walking beside you. The loaf seems to pulse faintly with its own heat, as though carrying the memory of the fire it left only minutes ago. You think about how many hands have shaped this moment. The farmer who coaxed the wheat from the earth, the miller who turned grain to flour, the baker who mixed, shaped, and watched over the dough's rise, and even the unseen laborers, the yeast cells, the bacteria that gave their quiet, invisible energy to the loaf's life. It is a chain of care, stretching backward through time and outward through countless lives. As you walk away from the glow of the bakery, the loaf warm under your arm, the night seems softer somehow. You can almost feel the bread cooling with each step, as though its heartbeat is slowing to match the quiet of the street. The rain eases, leaving a hush behind, and in that hush, you sense the threads that connect food to memory, place to season, stranger to neighbor. Perhaps tomorrow will bring another kind of warmth, one poured into a cup, rising as steam, singing its own gentle song. The last light in the window. The rain has softened now. It no longer drums on the roof with that urgent midday rhythm. Instead, it falls in fine threads, as though the sky has grown weary and is gently laying down what remains. Each droplet seems lighter, almost weightless, drifting into the streets, puddles with barely a ripple. You stand for a moment just inside the bakery door, your fingers curled around the still warm paper bag. The smell rising from it is both earthy and bright, the mingled scent of grain. and fire, yeast, and time. It wraps around you like a shawl, sealing in the day's quiet labor. Through the glass, you see the shop's last candle burning in the window. Its small flame dances in the currents of air, each flicker bending the shadows on the counter. The rest of the room is dim now, the oven's cooling, the shelves partly empty. The candle is not merely lighted, is signal. For as long as bakeries have existed, some form of evening beacon has marked the day's end. In old European towns, bakers sometimes hung lanterns outside when the final batch was ready, drawing neighbors from narrow, stone-walled streets. In coastal villages, windows glowed with bread oven fires, guiding fishermen back to shore. A single light in a window has always meant welcome, warmth, and the knowledge that someone is still awake, tending something for you. The baker steps into view one last time, wiping his hands on his apron. His shoulders are looser now, the day's effort settling into his frame. He nods toward you, not the quick nod of someone greeting a new customer, but the slow, certain acknowledgement of a shared moment. There is no hurry for you to leave, but he knows the night is ready to take over. You push the door open, and the cool air folds around you. It smells of wet stone and faint wood smoke, a mixture shaped by centuries of rain falling on this same street. Your shoes make soft sounds against the cobblestones, each step echoing briefly in the hollow spaces between the old buildings. The puddles you pass are small worlds, black surfaces holding fragments of gold from the candle's light. In them, the window seems to hover, glowing quietly beneath the dark sky. The loaf is still warm against your side. Inside, the crumb is alive in its final transformation starches, stabilizing, moisture balancing, aromas settling into place. Bread continues to change even after it leaves the oven. Bakers know this. It is why some loaves are never cut too soon. The crust, once crisp with steam, slowly softens as it draws in air from the cooler surroundings. It is a process that mirrors the body's shift from work to rest, from the heat of effort to the cool of night. You walk slowly, unhurried by the dimming light. Street lamps blink awake in a staggered procession, their halos clouded by the mist. Somewhere far above, a gap in the clouds reveals a single muted star. You remember reading once that starlight is ancient, that the photons now reaching your eyes may have been traveling for hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years. It's strange to think how something so small and faint can hold such vast history. The candle's glow behind you is far younger, yet it feels just as eternal in this moment. A breeze shifts the scent of your loaf toward you again. You can smell the tang of fermentation, that quiet, unseen work done by billions of yeast and bacteria in the dough's resting hours. They are life forms too small to see, yet their signature is unmistakable. In each rise and fall of the dough, they have left their mark, creating the air pockets that now give the loaf its softness, the balance of acidity and sweetness, the subtle hint of alcohol that bakes away. The way the crust colors in the oven, these are all the work of their silent, tireless chemistry, passing the narrow alley beside the post office. You catch the murmur of water running along the gutters. It carries with it the faint metallic temps of rain on iron, the mineral-rich scent of stone. Some scientists call this petrichor, a term for the aroma released when rain meets dry earth or weathered surfaces. The word itself comes from Greek petra, meaning stone, and ichor, the ethereal fluid of the gods in mythology. It feels fitting tonight, as though the rain has been distilled into something mythic, something almost drinkable in the air. The houses here stand close together, their upper stories leaning toward one another like neighbors sharing a quiet conversation. Curtains are drawn in most windows, though a few reveal slivers of lamplight or the movement of shadows behind glass. You think of how light travels differently depending on its source, how candlelight is soft because it dances, because it comes not from a steady electrical filament, but from combustion's ever-changing shapes. In physics, this flicker creates a warm spectrum, heavy in red and yellow wavelengths, gentle on the eyes and strangely calming to the mind. Perhaps that is why, even after electric light became common, people still gather around fires, candles, lanterns. It is less about necessity than it is about comfort. Your loaf shifts slightly under your arm, reminding you of its weight. Grain is light when scattered in the wind, heavy when gathered in a sack. Baked, it becomes something in between, substantial, enough to fill, light enough to carry home with ease. This transformation has been central to human survival for millennia. Long before metal tools or written words, people were grinding seeds into meal, mixing it with water and heating it over embers. Every civilization has its own way of shaping grain into sustenance, and every one of those ways carries the same quiet promise. Here is food you can hold in your hands, share with another, and trust to keep you through the night. The rain pauses entirely now. Drops cling to the edges of leaves, to the wrought iron railings along the steps. You can hear the smallest sounds more clearly, the rustle of a mouse in the gutter, the distant click of a latch closing, the quiet shift of your own coat as you move. Without the rain's steady veil, the night feels broader, as though the streets stretch farther than they did a moment ago. You pass the tailor's shop, its sign swinging faintly in the damp breeze. In its window, a different kind of light, small desk lamp, its green shade casting a pool of gold over scattered spools of thread. There is something deeply human about these last lights in windows. They are not for display, not meant to impress strangers passing by. They are simply there for the person who works late, for the one who finishes something by hand before sleep. In that way, they are kin to the baker's candle, each an unspoken reassurance that someone, somewhere, is still keeping watch. Your own street is darker, lined with trees whose wet bark glistens faintly in the spill of the nearest lamp. A thin fog begins to gather near the ground, blurring the boundary between pavement and grass. In the distance, you can see the faint golden square of your kitchen window, and the thought of stepping inside brings with it a slow, deep exhale. Soon, the loaf will rest on your counter, releasing its final curls of steam into the air. Perhaps you will slice it tonight, or perhaps you will let it sit until morning. Either way, it will carry with it the memory of the shop, the warmth of the oven, the last light in the window. You pause once more, before turning the final corner, glancing back the way you came. The street is empty now, save for the glistening stones and the soft breath of mist. The bakery's glow is gone from view, tucked behind the bend, but you know the candle still burns for a few moments longer. It will be snuffed out soon, marking the quiet close of the day. Somewhere, the baker is washing his hands, hanging his apron, listening to the cooling silence of his craft. You begin the last steps home, feeling the shift in the air as the night deepens. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the moon moves unseen, pulling at tides both distant and near. Your breath falls in slow rhythm, and the warmth of the bread seeps deeper into you, as if the loaf itself were a small ember carried from one fire to another, and you wonder if a candle's glow can linger in memory long after it fades. What other lights might wait for you in the quiet rooms ahead? And now, the night holds you gently. The story will carry you the rest of the way into that quiet place where dreams rise and morning feels far, far away.